Now, before we proceed with today's confession, just a warning. It is a bit icky.
Oh, really?
No.
So I'm giving it a 12, and also if you're eating, probably an 18.
This is good. Yes, I like.
So just make it absolutely clear.
Uh-huh.
Yes?
Yeah.
Everyone's been warned appropriately. And it comes from Septic Sam. That's how it's signed.
Tells you everything.
It does, actually. Father Sam and Brother Matt, Sister Holly or Susie. It's Sister Holly today. My confession goes back to 2019 when I had gainful employment working in transport for a plant hire company. Our speciality was getting large pieces of equipment or massive trailers into or out of tight spaces using smaller 4x4 vehicles that would be otherwise inaccessible for an articulated HGV. On the day in question, a Friday, I had been doing what were referred to in the company as ploppy runs. Basically, I was moving...
No.
I was moving toilet trailers off building sites.
Yeah.
And the day had passed completely uneventfully until the final job, if you want. There's not a lot of that. I had been tasked to remove a large multi-cubicle toilet trailer from an underground car park beneath a city centre building site where a large new budget fashion shop had been built. I arrived at 3:30 p.m. It was right in the city centre, which had made locating the entrance to the loading bay and staff car park bad enough, but I had the site foreman welcome me with, "Hurry up, chap, we closed the site at 4 o'clock. I don't know if he spoke like that, but that's what he said. I picked my way down the darkened access ramps. On finding the trailer, a large, ungainly thing with 6 doors along each side, allowing for 12 large hairy builders to carry out their daily ablutions at any one time, I discovered that one of its 4 tyres was flat. I connected my portable pump to the tyre and went about disconnecting the trailer's electricity and mains water supplies. I was pleased to see that it was what we called a septic tanked trailer, which meant that I didn't have to don my full hazmat suit to disconnect the sewage line. In these cases, the black water tank was always pumped out by another company before we arrived to take the trailers away, so I didn't run the risk of getting anything on myself.
Okay.
Scene is set.
I think it is, isn't it?
Hold your breath. Yes, good idea. By the time I'd done all of this, the tyre had inflated to a usable pressure and I got backed up and hooked up. It was now almost 4 p.m. and I was the only vehicle left on site as I picked my way carefully out of the darkened underground abyss. As I approached the exit, the foreman was standing, waiting, tapping his watch like Alex Ferguson, as that's a football reference, by the way.
Okay,
as I climbed the final ramp. I started to think that the trailer did feel heavy and thought that the handbrake maybe had come on or perhaps the tyre had gone flat again. This would also give the impression of a heavy trailer. I exited the car park and stopped to check the handbrake and tyre on the trailer. Strange, the handbrake is in the off position. The tyre is still fully inflated. So why did the trailer feel so heavy? And it was at this point that it hit me fairly obviously, largely helped by the smell that hit me at the same time. The septic tank had not been emptied. To make matters worse, the access cover to the tank was missing. So I was able to peep inside and confirm that it was indeed almost full to the brim. Normally in this situation, we would refuse to collect the trailer. So I turned to look at the site entrance, the same entrance that was now covered with a large locked roller shutter with no one to be seen. Father Sam and I had no choice but to carry on and return the trailer to the depot as planned. Only a relatively short distance of 10 miles or so. But the first couple of miles did involve going through some of the main thoroughfares of one of Britain's largest cities. And it was Friday. And the streets are jammed with traffic and the pavement is full of people happily spending a merry glass of wine or something on their way home. Some were even enjoying the late afternoon sun and sipping coffee at tables on the pavement outside the many little hostels that seem to lie in the city streets. As I negotiated the stop-start traffic, the black water started to slosh in its tank. As I braked and then accelerated over short distance, the inevitable happened. I have taken a lot out of this, by the way. Some people shouted and waved as I drove past. Others held noses or tried to cover their faces with the loose clothing. There were people with panic looks on their faces. My windows were up, my air conditioning was on full blast, and all was well. I stared stoically ahead, drove on, eventually reaching the storage yard where I unhooked the trailer and made my way home. I did noticed that the tank was a lot less full now, so that was nice. I therefore need to ask forgiveness from the thousands of Friday afternoon commuters who, instead of having a pleasant walk through the spring sunshine, were subjected to the onslaught of the senses. But most importantly, I ask for forgiveness from my daughter, who phoned me later that evening to say that while she had been waiting for a bus a good mile away from the incident, a river of what she described as fetid drain water had flowed along the gutter, actually causing the lady standing in the queue next to her to be physically sick in the bin.
Wow.
Imagine what I've taken out.
Yes.
Father Simon, forgiveness, please. Oh, and the Shiny New Confessions podcast, which is a joy to have back in the cab, by the way. I still work in transport, and it's good having you there for company as the day winds down. Yours, Septic Sam, brackets, not my real name. Oh, really? You surprised me. Well, he was committed to the job, as it were. And he was determined to make sure that he did everything that he was supposed to do. I don't think it was his fault, Sister Holly, really.
I get that he was trying to do his job. I understand that. But I think actually it would have been much, much better if he had just left the loos there, because it ruined everyone's afternoon. That poor woman threw up in a bin because of you and your weird toilets on the back of your van. And so for that reason, I mean, he just ruined thousands of people's afternoon.
Did, yes.
And I just, no, not forgiving at all for that one.
They wouldn't do that in Surrey.
They wouldn't do that in Surrey.
Very, very distasteful. However, an alternative viewpoint now.
Yes, here it comes. I'm going to forgive because he didn't do anything wrong, did he? I mean, he brought there. He didn't know that the loos hadn't been emptied. He thought they had been, and by the time he realised they hadn't been emptied, the site was closed down. So what was he supposed to leave the loos in the middle of town, in the middle of summer? No. He had to take them with him and get them out of the way. And imagine how much you must have taken out of that confession. Goodness me. Pretty stomach turning anyway. Not a good day to be driving a convertible car through that part of town, I'm going to say. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Do you forgive Septic Sam, please, for today's confession? 61054 on the text. First word is Simon. That would be very nice. Thank you. Just before the news. Today's confession, the first of the week from Septic Sam. He was involved in transport and logistics, that kind of thing. He had a toilet trailer. He had to get it through town. It was only 10 miles. Few thing happens, and some people were revolted by events.
Okay.
And that's all we're saying, but the people's verdict is in.
Not forgiven, says Shelby in Leeds. Imagine walking past this. I can't and don't want to imagine the smell. But forgiven, says Alex. If he'd left them there, saying not my job, everyone would have been upset with him and he'd have been in trouble at work. The site foreman is there to oversee things like that and make sure they'd been emptied. Would he have let a cement mixer go without leaving all the cement? Too focused on going home. Not his fault. And Tim says Septic Sam is indeed forgiven. He was acting responsibly by not leaving it behind. And in reference to Holly says, what? No flurry of slurry in Surrey?
Very good. Okay,
Yeah,
you
that's
enjoyed
not
that
bad.
one.
I did enjoy that.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have a confession and you fancy sharing it with us, send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. So it's 5:46 and oh my goodness me, there it comes. It's the drinks trolley, which we need very much, but what we need is Susie to pick something off our drinks trolley. What are you going for today?
Definitely. Well, I've grabbed a classic brown beer. So if you like your kind of classic bitters, it's a nano cask. It's called 3.4%, so not too strong. And it's by More Beer, and it's very malty and fruity, and it's lovely.
Very
Yes.
good. Okay. Thank you very much for that selection. Today's confession comes from Nigel. Dear Father Simon and his disciples, Mike, and this is not like yesterday, okay? So you
Okay, we're safe.
Not like you have to hold your nose or anything. My confession is from the mid to late 60s, where you'll find us all secret 60s fans listening to Ken Bruce. I was in my final year at St Custard's Junior School. There was a boy in our class who was the school bully, and we'll call him Grabber. He was also quite a bit bigger than most of us, so we always tried to keep out of his way and his mates, as crossing them often led to a good seeing to on your way home.
Okay.
There's a good expression.
Yeah.
That was a very bad practice, obviously. From what I knew, Grabber's father worked in the harbour. Something to do with unloading fish from trawlers and packing it up for sale, I think. For whatever reason, it appears Grabber would go down to the harbour on his way to school. Grabber would then come to school and would produce from his pockets or his bag a fish or two. Probably the scraps that were not saleable.
Oh,
you know
right.
what I'm saying? He had a couple of tricks that he used to perform with the fish. With the girls, he would push one in their face and get them to scream. For the boys, he would sneak up on them, pull back their collar of the shirt and drop one down their back.
Oh, lovely.
From memory, a cold and wet herring down your back in the middle of winter with the wind blowing off the North Sea, having to undo your clothing to remove the fish, was most unpleasant, Father Simon, as I'm sure you can imagine. I often walked to school with a girl from next door, from where I used to live, by the name of Babs. One day she was the victim of the fish in the face trick in the playground, and she screamed like a banshee and drew attention of a teacher. Now, boys wouldn't usually say anything for fear of the physical consequences from Grabber, and I must admit, I wanted revenge for my friend Babs, but I had no idea what to do. But this was obviously not the first time that a girl had told the teacher about what Grabber had done. Grabber was verbally quite nasty towards Babs afterwards, and word got around that Grabber had been told that if he carried on doing this, he would be expelled.
Oh.
We could only hope. I hadn't particularly thought of finding a way to get revenge, but then an opportunity came to mind one evening when I was round at my gran's. I went around to my grandma's, who lived just up the road, to listen to an England match on the radio, not live on television in those days. No one else in my family was interested in football. Okay. Yes, very good.
Yeah.
It's an England match, so it's...
Yeah.
Gran would cook my tea, and that evening she had kippers and I had fish fingers, if memory serves me right, though it is a long time ago. After the match, I was setting off for home when she said, "Could you put the rubbish in the bin as you go?" And I said, "Of course," and I left. And this is where the idea hit me. I kept the bag with the kippers and I took them home and I put them in my school bag. The following day I got to school but still wasn't sure what I was going to do. I went to the classroom straight away and my first thought was to put the kippers, which are heads and skeletons by and large, actually it's quite a pongy confession again, in Grabber's desk and somehow draw it to the teacher's attention. And then at the last minute I decided to put them in the teacher's desk, where she, disappointingly called Miss Smith, kept the register. I went back outside, did the usual stuff, until break went. So Miss Smith sat down. I think I was shaking with fear at this time. She opened her desk and let out a little yelp, followed by, "Grabber, come here." Grabber got up and walked to the desk. Everyone else was wondering what was going on. Miss Smith said, "Grabber, what is this?" He said, "Kippers." This was probably very funny at the time, stating the obvious, but I just was scared I'd be found out by either Grabber or Miss Smith. But Miss Smith obviously didn't believe his pathetic pleading of innocence and sent him to stand outside. Then she went to get the head teacher, who looked inside her desk. We didn't see Grabber again for about a week. As he got suspended, not expelled, and this seemed to us unnecessarily lenient and possibly the beginning of the end for Western civilization. You can't go light on people like this, Father Simon, or rapid moral decline will follow. You mark my words. Anyway, thankfully, he must have been read the riot act, because he never brought fish into school ever again, although he did, I'm afraid, carry on being a bully. I don't know if he ever wondered who set him up. Maybe he thought it was Miss Smith. So it is she I need forgiveness from. I haven't told a soul before now, but as both of us are now pensioners, and I don't live in this particular town,
Grabber's not tracking you down.
I think I might be safe from any retribution. Well, I mean, let's hope so. And who knows? Maybe Grabber has seen the error of his ways and he's now a pillar of the community. Who knows? Nigel needs forgiveness. Does he get it from Sister Susie?
Well, Nigel, I do you know what? I think fair play to you. I would hate to have a fish in the face or a fish down the back. I got a shudder down the back of my shoulders when you said that. However, I do think Miss Smith did jump to conclusions there, thinking it was Grabber, because if she'd looked into it a bit more, she would have realised that these were cooked and eaten as opposed to the fresh fish that I'm guessing Grabber brought in, so maybe she just didn't do her detective work. However, he could have been expelled, and even though he was a bully, I don't know if I can let that slide. So on this occasion, Nigel, I'm not going to forgive you.
You got a boy suspended, Brother Matthew.
Yeah, what goes around comes around, Grabber. I mean, obviously, this wasn't your fault at the time, but it probably would have been in the future. That's my take, in a sort of Minority Report kind of way.
Future crime.
Future crime.
Yeah,
That was probably coming, wasn't it? And you know, I mean, obviously, yes, you're right. Mrs. Smith should have worked out that a kipper couldn't have come from the sea because it should have been cooked and done before. So that all makes sense. And I love the fact that he's still fearing that a pensioner's going to turn up at his door and give him a sing to. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
I think that was very clear.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yes,
do you forgive Nigel for getting Grabber suspended? Stand to you. 61054. First word is Simon. Forgiveness or not? Oh yes. People's verdict, please. Just a moment before the news, Nigel confessed about his revenge on the fish-themed school bully Grabber by going to Nan's for dinner. She served kippers. He then put the kippers in the teacher's desk. It got Grabber suspended. Did young Nigel get forgiven, though? That's the issue.
Everyone is forgiving tonight because everyone hates bullies. So Julie in New Malden says, forgiven. There's one thing I can't stand, and that's bullies. Grabber sounded just horrible. He deserved to be suspended. Jonathan in Cornwall, forgiven. Ultimately, I blame the system. Miss Smith should have suspended him months prior to Nigel popping fish in her desk. She was aware of his cruel tricks. Nigel did the right thing. Well done for getting revenge. And Tim from Sutton Coldfield says, easy to forgive this one. Grabber needed putting in his place. He could have come off a lot worse.
Okay, we have to leave it there.
Yeah.
But Matt likes that one for sure. Your confession, please send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Feel as I could do with a drink.
Oh, a drink, yes. Here we go.
Yeah, that's what we need. We need the drinks trolley. And fortunately, producer Susie is online to tell us what we need to be drinking tonight.
Well, I've gone for a posh soft drink today, so you can get a Belvoir sparkling elderflower and rose, which is very refreshing and nice if you want a non-alky. And Matt, don't worry, you can put gin in it if you prefer.
There it is.
You can put gin in anything.
Yes,
really.
Well,
quite
yes.
right. Yeah.
Let's be honest. Okay, so here we go with tonight's unusual confession, which comes from Sergeant Wilson.
Oh.
Certainly taking us into uncharted territory. Dear Father Simon and the collective few, or whoever has turned up this week, is it Susie, Katie or Holly? Well, it's always
We've all
of
turned up.
them. They're all completely committed to the show.
Of course.
On hearing Dora the Explorer's confession about crossing a border and ending up in Luxembourg without knowing about it, I was feeling quite unconcerned because we've all strolled across various borders in the EU because there aren't any. However, there are some borders, Father Simon, you should never stroll across. Part of our job in the 80s, as fine, upstanding members of Her Majesty's Army, was to protect the northern flank of NATO from the dastardly Russians, who, as it's turned out, are just as dastardly as we always thought. So we're already moving into international,
We have, haven't we?
international affairs.
Wow.
So for 3 months every winter, we would deploy to Norway and train in the art of Arctic warfare. 2 months in southern Norway, and then the last month deep in the Arctic Circle, close to the Russian border. A beautiful part of the world, especially in winter, with all the snow and endless displays of the Northern Lights. It was while we were up north that we came close to initiating World War III. And that is the subject, which has not been refed particularly often on this particular feature.
Wow.
Well, we're all out training in 2 snow vehicles and fully armed to the teeth and, for all intents and purposes, ready for war. Somehow, in a whiteout, we got disorientated and didn't agree with what the map said. It wasn't Ordnance Survey, obviously, but I insisted that we carried on the bearing that we had until I felt it was safe to stop or too dangerous to carry on, or we saw something that matched up. After a while, the snow and the cloud cleared a little and we saw a building. Great, I thought. Once I locate the building on the map, we'll be fine. It was then pointed out to me that it looked like some kind of shop and people were coming out to see who we were. Some were quite excited for whatever reason, and we couldn't make out why. Then, from out of the mist came this vision of strangely dressed people being towed by large deer bearing gifts like deerskin rugs and coats, and funny hats to keep your ears warm. They also had the look of people used to hard lives. And then we saw the writing on the shop. It wasn't Norwegian, which we'd recognise, it was something else. These people selling their furs were Laplanders. The shop, a trading post, was Finnish. We had strolled into Finland. We were in the part called the Finnish Corridor, which sticks out into Norway. We'd actually invaded a sovereign country.
Right.
Wow.
Now, the reason everyone got excited was because if Russia found out, then they might invade because they allowed the British Army to train there. Now, of course, it's in NATO and the EU, but certainly not back in the 80s, just for reference.
Yes.
I decided the best course of action was to wave sweetly at everyone, mouth, "We're British," and ask my driver to turn round in a controlled manner, covering up the previous panic rising in me as the locals got more and more excited. Off we went, back into the cloud and snow, never to speak of it again. Until now, Father Simon. And I don't seek forgiveness from my men. There were 8 of us leading the invasion. 5 didn't have a clue what was going on, and the 3 of us in my wagon were too embarrassed to talk about it. No, I need to get forgiveness from the Laplanders, who we met, and they thought they were in trouble for harbouring British soldiers, and also the traders who clearly thought we'd buy all their wares, and we didn't buy a thing. No one speaks about this incident, even when we're at a reunion and the water has flowed. Naturally, my wife of 43 years knows. She just thinks Ivan should have just laughed at us and sent us home. Kind regards from Sergeant Wilson.
Wow.
Well, it was, it was certainly unusual. No one has mentioned about starting World War III or invading another country, because actually they did. They're fully armed in snow vehicles and they're into a sovereign country. What's going on? Anyway, Sister Susie will pronounce with her producer guidelines in front of her.
Well, Sergeant Wilson, I thought you were very typically British there and very polite in your retreat.
Sorry, wrong country.
It's just, if I walk backwards slowly enough, maybe they won't realise I'm here. And it must have been very confusing. However, as you stated, you nearly caused World War III, and for that fact alone, I'm afraid I can't forgive you.
I think so. I think that's fair enough. Brother Matthew.
I'm amazed in a feature called Confessions that we've never had before. Sorry I invaded your country.
Yes.
Oops.
Hello.
Didn't mean to. I mean, as it turns out, it was all fine because the locals were happy, weren't they? They were very happy to be invaded by bringing them all their stuff to wear. And having gone into Finland, it's just a pity they weren't able to finish what they started. Finish what they started. So for that reason, because of the puns, I'm going to forgive.
Can I just say that was one of the worst you've ever done?
That was so good, wasn't it? Genius.
Absolutely.
Well done, Matt.
Terrible.
Another winner.
So the thing is, do you forgive Sergeant Wilson and his cronies? 8 of them leading the invasion and 5 of them didn't have a clue what was going on. Anyway, so inspiring. So the people's verdict, please. Thank you, very kind. 61054. First word is Simon. Anyway, before the news, we had a confession from Sergeant Wilson. He and his squadron were deployed to the Arctic Circle and they invaded Lapland by mistake. So that's okay then. People's verdict, here we go.
Forgiven, says Sarah. Switzerland accidentally invaded Liechtenstein in 2007 thanks to an army training exercise. It's more common than us Brits think. Aid says forgiven. Everyone knows that when you're at the North Pole, every direction leads south. So it's easy to get lost. I'm conveniently glossing over the fact that Sergeant Wilson was presumably a highly trained expert at navigating difficult territories. And so in Corby says, I'm not sure it's Sergeant Wilson who needs forgiveness, but more likely Matt for that terrible but funny pun. Both Matt and Sergeant Wilson are forgiven.
You just added in but funny.
Yes, very funny.
Because nobody
yes, they did.
in their right mind thought it was funny.
Loved it.
Sergeant Wilson, thank you very much indeed for today's confession. You get the smart speaker. Heaven knows what you're going to do with it. However, if you have a confession, we would love to have it, please. And then if we use it, you get a smart speaker. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Anyway, it's time for the... Oh, look at that. It's the drinks trolley arriving just in time. The drinks trolley. What are we taking from the trolley, Sister Susie?
Well, I've taken some advice from your Big 45 and we've gone with a beer called Independence.
Yes.
And it's a 4.6% and it's a pale ale. So
lovely.
Nice and hoppy is
excellent.
delicious.
More drink with Nigel as it's a Foodie Thursday. Today's confession comes from Eva. Thank you, Eva, possibly Ava. But as I've made it up, I'm going to say it's Ava. There
of course,
we go.
yeah.
Father Simon, I have been deliberating on sending you a confession for some time now, but have decided to bite the bullet, so to speak. Picture this. 2 little girls, twins, raised as God-fearing children to a saintly mother who was auditioning for the local church choir. Every week, we were dragged to church, a place full of unusual smells, fuggy smoke, and people dressed to the nines. The priests looked amazing with their flowing robes and all that, swanning about. I believe that's an ecclesiastical term for doing a service. On the big day, we were ceremoniously marched up the stairs to an area where the choir and the organist were located. The balcony area, essentially. The organist began to play, and then, unfortunately, the choir began to sing. We were then subjected to all kinds of screeching from some dubious singers, all trying to out-sing each other. You know what that's like.
Yeah.
My mother could sing in tune, but was clearly overdoing it a bit, Father Simon, to say the least. She wanted to make a good impression, you see. And the faces they pulled as they went for the high notes. Father Simon, they looked like they were in agony, like they were massively constipated. I mean, come on, guys, what happened to harmony? A broader question, I feel, for another day. What did ever happen to harmony? Being twins, we were dressed identically, like a couple of bookends, and had to sport suitable headwear as a mark of respect for being in church. Mother made us wear Matt's favourite, soft blue berets.
Oh, lovely.
With angelic white dresses and sweet little ankle socks. Yuck, says Eva. Sometimes a beret looks like a decent choice. Ben Volpierre Pierrot, for example, from Curiosity Killed the Cat. He looked okay. Benny Hill, Frank Spencer, Che Guevara. Also, Beyoncé and Rihanna looked cool. You see what I'm saying? However, we were instructed in no uncertain terms to kneel down, be quiet, and not move an inch. This was almost impossible for any normal 3 or 4-year-old to do. We had stayed quiet and put our fingers in our ears on numerous occasions to block out the cacophony that was enveloping us, led by our mother. But enough was enough. Now we felt it was payback time. Whilst we found it interesting seeing all the congregation below us, trying to work out who some of these people were, we thought it would be fun to play a discreet game that we had just invented to alleviate the boredom, and a perfect opportunity presented itself. I had already discovered that picking fluff off my beret was easy to do, so nudged my twin sister when a suitable target was identified. So we got all our ammo and timed it to perfection. There was this bald, sweaty man who walked up the central aisle to communion, and we dropped our fluffy bombs on his shiny, sweaty head.
Oh, yeah.
Father Sam, you know about older women having what's known as a purple rinse? Well, I think the blue fluff look was far better on this guy. He was so effective because he was completely unaware that he looked ridiculous, and my sister and I, being small and kneeling down, were virtually invisible to anyone below. Whatever, we ended up with a holy bald man lightly dusted with purple fluff. Not half, stay bright. My mother never knew what heinous crime we committed, and unsurprisingly did not secure a place in the much coveted choir. Simon and lovely team, I'm asking for forgiveness. Amen, says Eva, but not her real name. I mean, I don't know. There is an age under which, you can pretty much get away with anything, I think. Young twins, 3 or 4 years old, Susie, I think even you, hard and stone-hearted as you can be, you're going to forgive in this case.
Oh, I don't know, Eva. Now, I did think with the mention of the beret might mean that Matt might not forgive. So, and then I remembered that he forgives everything. Yeah. So, but I do think that it was very funny. But I feel like you were a little bit mean. I don't think it was you weren't very nice to the bald, sweaty man. Like, maybe it's not his fault he was bald. It's not his fault he was sweaty. And I don't know if you were really sorry about it. So, as much as there was no harm done, and it was just a bit of fun, I'm not going to forgive.
Well, that seems a little harsh, but we did get a laugh out of a purple rinsed guy with fluffy bombs on his head. Brother Matthew.
I mean, as Susie points out, normally I've got a zero tolerance when it comes to berets. However, we've all been bored in church. We've all been kids bored in church.
Games
haven't we? Absolutely. And I can't think of a better target than a bald, sweaty man with you, because it's going to stick, isn't it? Because otherwise it'll go bounce off a hat, probably bounce off a head. So, bald, sweaty man, best place for the fluff. And I'm definitely going to forgive just for the reference to Alan Fluff Free Freeman, which you managed to sneak in there. Fabulous stuff.
Nice.
Good work. And yes, definitely forgiven.
How many fluffy balls could you get from a beret? I mean, I'm just wondering how many. Maybe they pretty much hacked it to death.
I shan't think there would be much left of that beret. No.
Well, it's the people's verdict now, please. Does Eva get any forgiveness? This is what we're going to find out. 61054 on the text. First word is Simon. Forgiveness or no for our beret bombers? Just before the news, we heard from Ava. It was her confession about her and her twin in church as small children, turning their berets into fluff bombs and dropping them onto the head of a bald, sweaty man. And therefore they stuck and gave him like a purple rinse as he went up for communion. It's a confession from the church, and this is the people's verdict.
So Simon Lee says, throwing little balls of fluff onto a bald man's head sounds absolutely hilarious. Totally forgiven. But not forgiven, says James in Liverpool. I totally understand that Eva wasn't enjoying the church singing, but putting fluff balls on that man's head was just so mean. And Deborah says, forgiven. Oh, definitely at 3. That's the sort of thing I'd get up to, just entertaining myself, though I've always been on this side of naughty.
Well, it might be that has sparked a thought, and you have a confession for us. Over the long weekend, send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.